You won't believe what just happened to country music legend Dolly Parton. The world was left in shock as heartbreaking news surfaced. Her beloved husband, Carl Dean, had passed away. Fans couldn't believe it. For over 6 decades, Dolly and Carl had been together, their love standing strong against all odds. But now, everything had changed. What made this story even more tragic was what happened next. Reports revealed that the grief was too much for Dolly to handle. The pain of losing Carl had pushed her to a breaking point, and in a terrifying moment, she collapsed. Her family and close friends rushed to her side, their hearts filled with fear. No one expected this to happen. The woman who had always been full of energy, always smiling, had been brought to her knees by unbearable sorrow. But here is the shocking part. This wasn't just an ordinary fainting spell. Something far more serious was happening to Dolly, and the people closest to her were terrified. For years, Carl had been Dolly's anchor. While she performed on the biggest stages, winning awards and breaking records, Carl remained by her side in the shadows, never seeking fame or attention. They had met in 1964 outside a laundromat in Nashville. Dolly always said it was love at first sight. From that moment on, they were inseparable. But what made this love story different was Carl's choice to stay away from the limelight. While other celebrity couples faced public scrutiny, their marriage remained strong because Carl never wanted to be a part of Hollywood. He loved Dolly for who she was, not for her fame. He was her safe place, the one person who truly knew her beyond the music and the persona. But destiny took an unexpected turn. As Carl's health started to decline in recent years, Dolly made a decision that shocked many. She slowed down her career, stepping back from some of her projects to be with him. She didn't talk about it publicly, but those close to her knew. She wanted to be there for Carl, just like he had always been there for her. But despite her efforts, time was running out. In his final months, his condition got worse. Dolly did everything she could to keep him comfortable, surrounding him with love, making sure he knew she was right there beside him. And then the moment she had been dreading finally arrived. Carl Dean took his last breath, and in that instant, Dolly's world shattered. The man who had been her everything for 60 years was gone. She had spent decades writing love songs, but now she was living her own worst heartbreak. Friends described how she locked herself away in her Tennessee home, unable to face the outside world. She wasn't the same Dolly anymore. The grief was unlike anything she had ever known. But this is where it gets interesting. Just days after Carl's passing, something happened that no one saw coming. Dolly, overwhelmed with sorrow, suddenly fainted. The news spread like wildfire, leaving fans panicked. What was happening to her? Was it exhaustion, stress, or something even more serious? Doctors were called immediately, and her family feared the worst. She had always been a strong woman, someone who faced every challenge with a smile. But this time, the pain was too much. The craziest part, while the world worried about Dolly's health, she was struggling with a decision that could change everything. After losing Carl, she stood at a crossroads. Would she continue performing, using music as an escape, or would she walk away from everything to grieve in private? This was the biggest question on everyone's mind. People close to her believed she might never return to the stage. The loss had taken too much from her. But then, in true Dolly fashion, she made a decision that left everyone stunned. She wasn't just going to return to music, she was about to do something no one had expected. What she announced next was more than just a tribute. It was a deeply personal project that would reveal a side of Carl Dean the world had never seen before. But before she could move forward with it, something happened that changed everything. A discovery that shook her to her core. Just when she thought she knew everything about Carl, she found something that left her speechless. And this is where her story took the most shocking turn yet. Just when Dolly thought she was starting to process her grief, fate had other plans. As she sat in the quiet of her Tennessee home, surrounded by memories of Carl, she stumbled upon something that would change everything. While going through his belongings, she found an old, worn-out leather journal tucked away in a drawer. At first, she thought it was just another keepsake, a place where Carl might have scribbled thoughts or notes over the years, but as she flipped through the pages, her hands began to tremble. This wasn't just any journal. It was a deeply personal account of Carl's love for her, his struggles, and his hidden emotions, things he had never spoken about. You won't believe what she found next. Among the pages filled with heartfelt words, one entry stood out. Carl had written about his biggest regret, the one thing he wished he had done differently. He admitted that he had spent his entire life avoiding the spotlight, choosing to stay out of public view, but deep down, he feared that the world misunderstood his silence. He worried that people thought he wasn't devoted enough to Dolly, that his absence from her public life made it seem like he didn't love her as deeply as he did. But the truth was the opposite. His love for her was overwhelming, and he had always struggled with the thought that he never publicly expressed just how much she meant to him. He even wrote that he had once planned to surprise her with a love letter, a final confession of everything he had kept in his heart, but he never found the right moment to give it to her, and now it was too late. But here's where it gets even more unbelievable. As Dolly continued to sift through his things, she discovered something she never expected: a sealed envelope labeled "For my love when I'm gone." Her heart pounded as she opened it, unsure of what she was about to read. She expected a goodbye letter, maybe words of comfort from Carl, telling her to stay strong. But what she found inside was something far more shocking. The letter contained a confession. Carl had been keeping a secret for years, one that he had never shared with her. Before they met, he had fathered a son he had never told her about. This revelation hit Dolly like a thunderbolt. For 6 decades, she had believed that she and Carl had shared every part of their souls with each other. Now, she was faced with the reality that he had carried this secret alone. The letter explained that the child's mother had insisted on raising him away from Carl's growing connection to Dolly, wanting a quiet life free from the public eye. Carl, torn between respecting the mother's wishes and his own love for Dolly, had made the painful decision to stay silent. But as the years passed, he often wondered if he had done the right thing. His biggest fear was that Dolly would one day discover the truth and feel betrayed. His final wish was that if she ever found out, she would forgive him. The weight of this revelation was almost too much to bear. Dolly sat there in stunned silence, staring at the letter, her mind racing. A lifetime of memories with Carl flashed before her eyes. Had he wanted to tell her? Had he struggled with this secret every single day? And most importantly, what was she supposed to do now? Was she ready to seek out the son Carl had never truly known? This wasn't just about her grief anymore. This was about rewriting everything she thought she knew about the man she had loved for 60 years. But before she could even process this revelation, there was one more shock waiting for her. Something hidden among Carl's belongings that would make this story even more unbelievable. A discovery so powerful that it would not only change Dolly's life, but also change the way the world remembered Carl Dean forever. Dolly sat frozen, the letter still in her trembling hands. The man she had loved for 60 years, the one she thought she knew better than anyone, had carried a secret so deep that it shattered everything she believed about their love story. But just as she was trying to process the truth about Carl's hidden son, she found something else, something even more shocking. As she continued searching through his belongings, she discovered a small, tattered envelope buried beneath a stack of old letters. Inside, there was something unexpected: handwritten lyrics to a song. But this wasn't just any song. It was a song Carl had written for her, likely never expecting her to find it. The words were raw, filled with emotions that Carl had never spoken out loud. It was as if, through this song, he was finally saying everything he had kept in his heart for decades. The lyrics told the story of their love, the quiet, unspoken moments, the sacrifices, the way he had admired her from a distance while choosing to stay in the shadows. This is where it gets interesting. Dolly had spent her entire life writing love songs, but now, for the first time, she was on the receiving end of one. And the craziest part, Carl had never once written a song in his life. At least that's what she thought. Had he been secretly writing music all these years? Had he kept this hidden because he never wanted to step into her world? The realization hit her hard. Even in his silence, Carl had always been speaking to her, just not in the way she had expected. But the most heartbreaking part was that Carl never had the chance to give her this song himself. She wondered if he had planned to share it with her before he passed, or if he had been too afraid, too unsure of whether she would understand. As she read the lyrics over and over, tears streamed down her face. This wasn't just a love letter. It was a piece of Carl's soul, something he had left behind for her to find when she needed it the most. And at that moment, Dolly knew exactly what she had to do. She made a decision that no one saw coming. She wasn't just going to keep Carl's song to herself. She was going to record it, but not just any recording. She would bring Carl's words to life in the way he never could. She would turn his hidden song into a tribute, a final duet between them. Even though he was no longer here, it would be her way of honoring him, of making sure that the world knew just how deeply Carl had loved her. But as she prepared to share this deeply personal project with the world, she couldn't shake one thought: Carl's son, the child he had never known, the piece of his past that had remained hidden for so long. Could she really move forward without confronting this truth? Could she honor Carl's legacy without acknowledging the part of him that had been lost? And then, as if destiny was guiding her, something happened that changed everything. A name, a location, a clue that led her straight to the son Carl had left behind. But what she found next, that was the real shock. Dolly knew she couldn't ignore this. Carl's hidden son wasn't just a secret from the past. It was a living, breathing part of his legacy. And now she had a choice to make. Would she reach out? Would she open this door, knowing it could change everything she thought she knew about Carl? She felt a storm of emotions: grief, love, confusion. But one thing was clear. Carl had loved her enough to carry this secret for decades, fearing it would hurt her. And now she had to decide whether to carry on in silence or finally uncover the truth. But here's where it gets unbelievable. As Dolly began searching for answers, fate stepped in. She didn't have to look far because the truth was already waiting for her. Through a close family connection, she learned that Carl's son was alive and well, living not too far from her in Tennessee. His name had never been publicly linked to Carl, and he had lived his life completely unaware that his father had been one of the most mysterious figures in country music history. But the moment Dolly saw a picture of him, her heart nearly stopped. The resemblance to Carl was undeniable. It was like looking into the past, like seeing the man she had loved so deeply standing before her again. But here's the shocking part. Carl's son had no idea that Dolly Parton even knew he existed. For all these years, he had been raised without his father, never knowing the truth of his origins. And now, Dolly was faced with one of the hardest decisions of her life. Should she reach out? Should she tell this man that his father had loved him from afar, but had been too afraid to change his life with the truth? Or should she leave it alone, letting Carl's secret rest in peace? Dolly had always believed in destiny, and she knew this moment wasn't a coincidence. This was her chance to do what Carl never could. But what made this story different? It wasn't just about uncovering a long-lost family connection. It was about healing, about love, about giving Carl the closure he had never found. And so with a deep breath and a heart full of emotion, Dolly made her decision. She reached out. She sent a letter, just like Carl had done for her, explaining everything. She told him about Carl, about the love they had shared, about the regrets Carl had carried with him until the end. She didn't know how he would react, didn't know if he would want to meet her, or if he would even believe her. But she knew one thing for certain: Carl's story deserved to be told. And then the moment of truth arrived, a response. Carl's son wanted to meet her. The emotions were overwhelming as they sat face to face for the first time. It wasn't just about introductions. It was about filling in the missing pieces, about bringing together a family that had been separated by time and choices. But the craziest part, As they talked, as they shared stories about Carl, something incredible happened. Dolly realized that this wasn't just about her grief anymore. It was about something much bigger, about making sure that Carl's love didn't just fade away. And so she made one final decision, one that no one saw coming. She wouldn't just honor Carl with a song. She would dedicate her entire upcoming album to his memory, to the love they shared, to the son he never got to know, and to the truth that had finally come to light. Because love, real deep, once in a lifetime love, doesn't end with goodbye. It lives on in the stories we tell, in the music we create, and in the lives we touch along the way. And for Dolly, this wasn't just the end of Carl's story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one she would carry with her forever.